What I'm going to do here in this video is describe an experience that I've gone through now for approximately 60 years that has really tested my belief in God. And then I'm going to discuss how the Self-Realization Fellowship meditations, teachings, and practices have greatly assisted me in pulling through, and how they've now made my belief in God by far the strongest it's ever been. My sister recently passed away, and when I was just 9 years old, she began to suddenly change. She became convinced that people were now talking to her constantly and telling her that they were going to kill her. She continued getting worse, and I began thinking, how could a God who was supposed to be a kind and loving God do this, or allow this to happen to my sister? What was happening to her was that she was beginning to develop schizophrenia. She began needing to talk to my dad constantly whenever he'd come home from work, having all of these problems and fearful thoughts in her mind that she needed to tell him. So as a young boy, seeing this sudden change going on, it completely changed my life, and then over time, this experience then helped me to have more empathy and step back from being the baby of the family, as my older sister was now the one who needed the attention. This situation continued on for about 28 years until my dad passed away in 1994, and then both my sister and my mother, who was progressing with Alzheimer's disease herself, became my responsibility to make sure that they were taken care of. And when all of this responsibility suddenly hit me, I was simultaneously going through divorce. My mother then passed away 4 years later, and at some point while they were still living together, I discovered that my sister was so afraid that someone was going to kill her that she was sleeping in bed surrounded by knives all around her on the mattress. So I then recognized that I needed to hire someone to live with them to help take care of them during the final 1 to 2 years or so of my mother's life. Then when my mother passed away, I needed to then place my sister in a board and care facility. I figured that it might take maybe 6 months or so for her to then adjust to living in this facility, but this turned out to be the greatest miscalculation of my life. Despite never having needed to be hospitalized during her lifetime, my sister then proceeded to be hospitalized approximately 97 times over the next 27 years, including one time when she went into a coma for 9 days, and the doctors said that all of her vital signs were fine, and they had no idea why she was in a coma. And then she suddenly woke up speaking gibberish for several days. She continued to be hospitalized many more times for things like sepsis infections and needing to get her medications rebalanced, and it really appeared, all in all, that she missed not being able to live with mom and dad anymore, and this was very, very difficult for her to deal with. Then finally, after being under my care for more than 30 years, including the 4 years that my mother was still living and continuing to deteriorate, my sister began going through a series of hospitalizations that made me realize that the end was now likely near. Then the last time that I was able to speak to her while she was still conscious, she said to me in a very faint voice, "Thank you for visiting me." Then when I told her that I loved her, she said to me in that same faint voice, "Thank you for loving me." Then something sudden and quite unexpected happened during that visit. She turned her head and looked at me, staring straight into my eyes with her own eyes, steadfast, serious, intense, and unflinching. This sent chills down my spine as I felt that this was now her soul staring deep into my own as if to ask, who is this person who has been there for me all these years? And this then was the last time that I saw her when she was still conscious and could still speak to me. So this has been a very, very wild journey for me, and I've realized along the way that any worry that I've ever had about my life and my future, and any worry that I've had about whether or not I'd be able to pay my bills, or make my car payment, or make my rent or mortgage payment, these have all been a complete luxury for me to have experienced, compared to my sister continually thinking and feeling that there were people coming to kill her. Keeping this in mind, there was a woman I had consulted with many years ago, and when I told her about the anguish and the pain that I had been experiencing along the way over all of this, she said, "Your job is to make sure that your sister gets the care that she needs, and the rest is between her and God." Just hearing this definitely brought me some relief, because it was so difficult to be continually watching her deteriorate year after year and thinking that there was something I should be able to do to make her better, but I just couldn't find the way. And there were times when I would find myself thinking, I really feel that I'm failing Mom and Dad by not being able to make her better. Then another time, in the midst of all this, maybe 9 years ago, I consulted with a senior self-realization fellowship monk, and this is what he said to me. "I believe that when it came time for your sister to be born into this lifetime, she got together with God and decided that she would rather live this life to burn off much more karma at an accelerated rate. She was able to look down and see the family that she would be born into, and saw that she would have a mother and father who would be kind and loving when she would begin going through this. And then she was able to see years down the road, after her mother and father had passed, that she would have a loving brother who would be there for her to make sure that she got the care that she needed." Whoa, this definitely brought me some great relief, and it continues to bring me great relief today. So now when I look back on this experience, I believe this is what God wanted both my sister and me to experience during this lifetime, in alignment with our own karma. Yogananda has said that while we are living in the body, and we have questions about why we are living the lives that we are living, and why the world seems to be so cruel to us at times, we cannot accurately get the answers to these questions until we leave this body and go to be with God. So while it was very difficult for me to come to terms with all of this before I found the Self-Realization Fellowship meditations, lessons, teachings, and practices, I now trust in the feeling that God is in fact a kind and loving God, but that I don't really understand His entire big picture and His plan for all of us. Yet, Yogananda has also said that when it comes time for us in the afterlife to know and understand God's overall plan, that we will then recognize the brilliance of it. But for now, I'll keep scratching my head and wondering. In addition, when it came time to have a ceremony where we would scatter my sister's ashes at sea, my current wife of 24 years now, my daughter, and I rode out on the boat for 40 minutes until we arrived at the site where we would perform the ceremony. I remember the ride out to the site, and I was feeling good, all things considered, and I was enjoying listening to the music that I had chosen for the ride out. Then when we arrived at the site, I vaguely remember hearing the song playing that I had chosen for that exact moment, and then I vaguely remember the first few sentences that I said in honoring my sister. And then I had no memory of what happened during the next hour after that. I had no memory of the scattering of the ashes at sea along with the rose petals, an activity that I was told that I had assisted with. And I had no memory of hearing the other music that I had chosen for the ceremony too. And I had no memory of the entire 40-minute boat ride back to the harbor either, and I didn't recall hearing the music that I had chosen for that entire return trip too. So it seems that, despite me feeling relatively okay on the boat ride out to the site for the ceremony, that when it came time to do the ceremony, my mind, emotions, and my body were totally experiencing an overload, And despite my wife telling me that I seemed okay, all things considered, during the entire trip, 1 hour of my memory went missing. And nothing like that has ever happened to me. But since then, my memory of the entire event has now been coming back to me. So I guess during the ceremony, when I was mentally and emotionally processing going back some 60 years, to when my sister was a healthy, happy girl, and then taking in everything that I have experienced along with her since then, and then coming to that exact moment in time when her physical remains would now be released forever, that was a lot to handle. But then my wife told me soon afterwards that when we were getting off the boat when we arrived back in the harbor, that I had turned to the captain and said, you seem like someone who I've known in a previous lifetime. So when my wife told me that, I smiled and said, that really does sound like me. So now I sit here in gratitude for this entire experience, and gratitude because I could be there for both my sister and my mother when they needed me the most. And in the process, I have learned great humility and empathy for others in a way that could never have happened without living through all of this during this lifetime. I began as the baby of the family, being 9 years younger than my sister, and then, along in my journey with her, she became my baby sister, and in many ways, I became her parent. And still today, I have that same question that I had when I was that 9-year-old boy. Why would a kind and loving God allow this to happen to my sister? But I understand, as I mentioned earlier, that I cannot fully have the answer to that question until it's time for me to go and be with God. In addition to this, there's an old expression that I've heard some people say that has helped me to keep a smile on my face along this journey. And that expression is, God, I know that you'd never give me more than I can handle, but I just wish you wouldn't trust me so much. So again, I express my gratitude for going through all of this, and gratitude for the way that it has helped me to grow and evolve. In addition, I express my great gratitude for Paramahansa Yogananda, his lessons, his writings and teachings, including the meditations and the Kriya Yoga that he has given us. And of course, for all of the monks, nuns, and staff people of Self-Realization Fellowship, for the work that they continually do, for the way that this Self-Realization Fellowship program has completely transformed my life, and for the continued spiritual growth and evolution that I will experience and attain along my journey. In addition, despite this very difficult experience with my sister for almost 60 years, seeing her continually suffer and seeing her continually live in fear of people who she believed were constantly trying to kill her, through my practice of the Self-Realization Fellowship meditations and my studying of the lessons and my reading of Yogananda's writings, combined with my watching the videos of the lectures given by the SRF monastics, my belief in God is now the firmest, the strongest, and the most resolute that it has ever been.